All right, hi everyone. What I'm going to take you through right now is how to initially set up Pix4D, take a set of about 200 images, and get them processing. I want to show you some of the interface and a few of the little tricks that you're going to need to know to just get started and set up in a way that's efficient, that'll work for you moving forward. So the first thing I want to show you is here we have a effectively blank home screen in Pix4D. Now, this left-hand side of the screen, we see Home, Map View, Array Cloud, Volumes, Mosaic Editor, and Index Calculator. You're going to be referring to these a lot and changing them around. Below that, there is the Processing option, Log Output, and Processing Options option. So to begin, I am going to select New Project, and then I'm going to browse to my desktop where my images are. I've created a folder called Pix4D Setup. Double click on that, and inside of that you can see I have these mapping images setup folder, but I'm going to choose the Pix4D Setup folder. That's where my Pix4D project files are going to be saved in this example. So I do that. There's a Use as Default Project Location checkbox. This is optional if you're going to be moving things around or if you want to change things. Here's where you do it. I'm going to go and just call this initial underscore setup, and I do like to use underscores instead of spaces in these names, and there's a real reason for that, and I won't be covering that in this video. Then I'll hit next. I'm going to add images, and again we're going to go back to the mapping images setup folder, and now inside of that I'm going to select into mapping images setup. I'll select the first one. I'm going to shift click and select the last one. I'll hit open, and then you can see it loads up. I've got 208 images selected. Nothing else needs to be modified here. I'll hit next. The image properties windows comes up. This is generally going to be the defaults you want. WGS84 is correct. Looks like everything 208 out of 208 are geotagged. And then as we go down here, there's a list of all the images. We don't really need to worry about this window, but this is good to go. It also recognizes that we do have this FC6310. This is the resolution size for the camera on the Phantom 4 Advanced, which is what I flew for this mission. So everything's good here, and I'm not changing anything. Next, I'm going to move on to the output coordinate system. We're going to leave it again here at the World Geodetic System 1984, so WGS 1984. One option you might want to change is going to be the units, so meters versus feet. I do prefer to work in the meters, and it was auto-detected here, so everything's good to go here. And we'll go next. And now in this case, I do have a couple of templates already set up, but usually what you're going to find in your first setup is Pix4D is going to ask you to, or it's going to pre-select 3D maps for you. And then sometimes Start Processing Now is selected. You want to unselect that. You want to go in and make some modifications before you begin your processing, and then we'll hit Finish. Now it's going to go through Finish, and a little while later we'll come back and we'll have the maps up. Well, that was quick. Here's our map with the, it did switch over to map view, and this shows all the cameras that I shot. Now it looks like I did miss a row or part of a row for data collection. That's okay, this is still going to serve its purpose. Now, a couple other things happen down here. When you initially start up Pix4D, these windows may or may not appear, but what I want to do is show you right now is how you want to get these set up for the most efficient way possible. So I'm going to click Processing, and I'm going to click Log Output. Now the first thing we see here is the log output is below the processing selection, but what I want to do here is I'm going to go into the Arrange Processing and Log Output views, and I want to have them selected as horizontally. So now they're side by side, and I can also grab this, squeeze it down a little bit, and that's going to give me more screen real estate. Don't need to worry too much about how much we see in the log output, and in fact you may not want to have this open. However, as you get used to Pix4D, this is an area that does help to have open. It'll tell you a whole bunch of information about the project as it's processing. Most of that just is used to give you an idea of how long it's going to take. Now if we look in the processing area, what we'll notice is we have initial processing, point cloud and mesh, DSM, orthomosaic all selected. Right now it wants to run 23 processes to go through this map. But we don't want to do that because we want to just do an initial processing setup. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select processing options. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect number 3, number 2, and I'll go into number 1. And what I want to do here is I want to set this to rapid, because what I want to do is just go through this really quickly and have Pix4D take a look at all the images, make sure they're all aligned, make sure they're valid images, and we'll show you in a second what that looks like if they're not. One other little tip here, down at the very bottom there is an advanced feature, so go ahead and select that. Now that did add some additional tabs up here, and in fact the same thing would have happened in number 2 and number 3, which we will get to in the course. The matching is something that as we get further into Pix4D, we'll be taking a look at this, and the calibration is a window that we're almost never going to be looking at. We just leave it by default. I'm not even going to select those right now. I am going to, however, leave the orthomosaic preview in the quality report just so we can get an idea of what that looks like in the quality report. This is an optional feature. If you turn it off, you will run through the processing a little bit faster. Now, before I hit OK, what I want to do is I want to save my template. So I'm going to go here, create new template with current options, and I'm going to say initial setup template. And you can name these anything you want, give them a description. Here you don't have to worry about the underscores for spaces, that's only in the file names. I'll hit OK here, and I do want to select OK, not cancel. If I hit cancel, you'll see that when I do hit OK, this is going to change over here. If I hit cancel, it won't, so I'm going to hit OK. Now we have 8 options that are going to be run through the initial processing, and it's only going to run that, and you can see how it is selected over here. So now I have this ready to begin processing, and I'm going to just take another quick peek just to make sure we can, for instance, one of the things we could do is, you'll notice that current options are initial setup template. So it even tells you what your template is that you're going to use. I can go into the template manager. You can see that I have, these are my user ones that I've created, and these are the ones that are default by Pix4D. Well, let's see. Let's just go ahead and take, I'm going to just take Core's high settings. So, and by high I mean I'm running at the highest level, and I'm just going to delete it. I can delete it, so I'm just going to do that. But if I go here and select that, you'll see the remove button isn't an option. So you can manage yours here, but you can't modify any of the Pix4D default templates. So I'll hit OK, and I'm going to hit start. And it will begin to process. If we scroll down here, we'll begin to see some of what's going to happen during the processing. And right now it's computing key points. This process should take with these 200 images. Now I'm running a MacBook Pro, one of the more recent ones. It's not the fastest one out there, but it's close, and I imagine that this will take these 200 images maybe about 20 minutes or less. So we're going to let it do that, and we'll be back when that's completed. All right, now that we've completed the initial processing, the first thing I want to point out is the initial processing option here is green, and that means that the parameters that we set under processing options are reflective of what was run for this particular step 1, the initial processing. So if I was to go in and, for instance, change some of these processing options, like if I go in here, and I'm going to do this because this is what I'm going to do next, and I select full, now 3D Maps is the current option that matches these particular parameters. I'll hit OK, and as I do that, you now see initial processing is red, 0% done, total of 0 for 8. So when we first started the application, we were in Home, then we went to Map View, and then once it finished, we're in the Ray Cloud view, and we're going to be in Ray Cloud view a bunch. So let's take a look around and see what we kind of have going on here. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure all of these things are all tidied so that everything is closed. If they're not, go ahead and close them up. If I open up cameras, you'll see that there are a couple of options that we want to look at. Display properties, don't worry about that for now, but it's the calibrated, uncalibrated, and disabled cameras. Now in this particular case, all of our cameras calibrated, and that's fantastic. If they hadn't, they would be red instead of this this blue and green icon-y like thing ball that's attached to each one of the images. So If I were to, for instance, uncheck cameras, well, now my cameras are gone. What I'm left here are the tie points, and if I click tie points or uncheck it, now that disappears. Raise doesn't really do anything here. It's something that we'll play around with later in the course. So I'm going to turn everything back on. Fantastic. Everything is in good shape. Now, if I were to disable some cameras, or need to, what I would do is I would just click on the one that I want to disable, and then as you can see over here, it gives you on the right hand side of the screen, it gives you a whole bunch of information in regards to that particular image. But I could then, if I click disabled, now it will take it out of the model that's going to be run, and it's down here in the disabled one. Well, we would have been looking for them in uncalibrated, but since we don't have any of those, I'm just giving you an example of one that is calibrated, and in fact I will then re-enable it, get it out of there, and we're all good to go here. So we're real happy with that. Now, before we move on, we can take a look at the quality report, and that did get generated. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go up to the process menu, and I am going to select quality report. So here's my quality report. The couple things that you just want to look at real briefly is, do you have 4 out of 5 of these checked green? Now the very last one is georeferencing, yes, no 3D ground control points. We didn't have any set. We would have imported those before we did the initial processing, or we would import them now and then do the full processing, but since we don't have them, this one's you don't have to worry about. The one that you might have to worry about is going to be the data set. You might have multiple layers here, and if you have more than one layer, this is going to be a warning triangle. Also, if you have, there's a threshold, too many images that are uncalibrated, you'll also get that. So this is one of the places you can go to look to just see what the status of that first initial run is. Here's the preview of the orthomosaic. It didn't take very long, but we can see it looks like we're going to come up with a good map to begin with. The digital surface model here as well. And then if I start kind of scrolling down, I am going to just go through some of these really quickly. And I just want to get down to absolute camera position and orientation uncertainties. The number, if you don't know statistics, don't worry about it. You don't need to necessarily. Just a little bit about what standard deviation means and so on and so forth. But the X and the Y and the Z, these are related to how the camera is calibrated from their actual position to the calibrated position that Pix4D determined. Well, what we see here is some pretty low numbers. X and Y will almost always be the exact same number, and Z will always be will be greater than the X and Y value because it's harder to do elevation. Omega and Phi, don't worry about that too much, but the short of it is these three, the closer they are to 0, in particular your kappa of the sigma, the better off you are. So here I have 0.010, and this is a very, very good number. I've certainly seen them as bad as, say, 50. Literally 50, and by going in and removing uncalibrated images and adding more manual tie points, which we will get to later, you can get this number. I saw a student do it, get this number go from 50 to less than 1. He was pretty proud of himself, and I thought he did a great job. And through that whole process, he learned just how manipulating in Pix4D some of the parameters and images and adding manual tie points can change your data and make your map better. But again, and one of the first things we're going to continue to point out throughout this course is you can't start with bad data and make it better in Pix4D. Start with good data and make it better in Pix4D. So data acquisition is the most critical part of the mapping process. If you don't start with good data, you're just not going to end up with good data. There's almost no way of getting it out of there. So that's pretty much it for getting set up. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because we are providing you with these same files that I ran here, so your number should be almost exactly the same. And then what you can do is, if you would like to, you can then uncheck initial processing, or we'll go back in here. I'm not going to do this for this particular model in this video, but what I would do next is I would go and I would select manual tie points to full. And then if, say, I'm going to bed and I just want to worry about it in the morning, I could also select the point cloud. And we're not going to do DSM and orthomosaic just yet, but then with the point cloud, so I'll have point cloud, and in this case, it's going to go a lot faster if I just leave it at the default half. You'll find that original is very slow, but you do get a higher density of points. Leave everything else the same and go ahead and just uncheck anything that's going to be for the export, because you can always export all these file types later in the game. You don't have to do it when you're doing the initial processing. And because I know everybody wants to play around with a 3D model, we're going to leave Generate 3D Texture Model on, and we're also going to leave this as the medium resolution default, and then I'm again going to turn off any of the export options, and that's going to be pretty much it from here. What I would do is then hit OK, and now you can see over here I've got initial processing in point cloud and mesh, and we're going to run 16 processes. This is probably going to take a couple of hours, so don't go too deep with these files right now. Once we've completed the mapping section of the entire course, you'll have your own images to work with of the home that we're going to be modeling, and you're going to want to work with that, and you're going to sort of iterate through this initial processing, get it refined, and then move on to the point cloud, and then from there you can move on to the DSM and orthomosaic and generate all those file types. However, you're going to have more data this weekend than you're going to be able to process during the weekend, so just run some of the default settings if you kind of want to see what some of these things do, but keep an eye on this total percentage and how long it's going to take. You might end up just being better off just running things at lower resolutions just so you can see what the file types are. But anyway, that's it. That's the initial setup that I want everybody to do before we get to the course. It's going to help you greatly, so that we'll check it on Friday night. Saturday we'll do the data acquisition, and then you should all be in good shape to be able to take your new data that you acquired during the day, go back to wherever you're staying, and begin to do some processing. And I am not asking that anything is done by the next morning, just that you do get used to the interface, get used to where some of this stuff is. Another thing you can do is definitely take a look at the process menu and the Ray Cloud menu. What you'll kind of notice is the Ray Cloud stuff aligns with some of the other icons you see around here, but you're going to spend a lot of time in the process menu, and the further along you get in the process, the more options that will become available. And you can see some of them here, like generate 3D textured mesh, and that was why I said, in this case we don't necessarily have to generate the 3D textured mesh. This is an option. You'll notice point cloud is not. You have to have a point cloud before you can generate a mesh, a DSM, an orthomosaic, anything. So point cloud's never not an option. The 3D texture mesh is. Since you're going to be running this maybe tonight or your data Saturday night, go ahead and select that, hit OK, and hit start. That's it from me. Look forward to seeing you guys on Saturday. Have fun.